Hey stats class, I'm going to go through and show you how to do this Excel lab really quick. So I'm going to grab our data and I'm going to go to Google Sheets. I already got it saved on here, but you just go to like something, you can do a search for it and then just sign in with your Google account. I've already signed in here. And I'm going to paste it in. Alright, and then I'm going to change this up here to Excel Lab 1 and put my last name. So you would put your last name obviously when you do it. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my data, select my data by clicking the very first number right there, holding down the click and dragging it down all the way to the bottom. So you keep scrolling until you go past all the data. The other way you can do this if you're on a PC, and I'm sure there's a way to do it if you have like a Mac. If you click on the first one, hold down Shift and Control and press down, you can also highlight the data that way. Alright, now after I've done that, I'm going to go up here to data, and I'm going to go not sort sheet column, I'm going to go to sort range. So the range is what I've selected. So from A to Z, that means from smallest to largest. And now I can see the minimum age right there. The maximum age is down at the bottom. Okay, once I've got it sorted, I'm going to find the minimum age, the maximum age, and I'm going to select my number of classes. I'm going to just write number of classes. Alright, and then the last thing I want to write down here is class width. Alright, and these are just going to be labels, and I'm actually going to do the calculations of these numbers over here. Alright, underneath class width, I'm going to give myself a little gap down here, and I'm going to write in that next space, so go down one, I'm going to write lower class boundary. Alright, and notice when I just highlight like there and I get the double arrow, I can click and it'll expand to the widest thing in the column. So every time if I go beyond the width of that, I could just go up there, double click again, and it will expand it to the newest, longest row. Alright, then I'm going to write lower class limit. Alright, right beside that I'm going to write upper class limit, and then finally upper class boundary. Okay, and then right beside that I'm going to write frequency. And then the very last thing I'm going to write here is relative frequency. Alright, and we'll fill all these things up as we go. Okay, so let's start with the minimum value. So the minimum value, I can see it right there, it's 29. Since I've sorted the data, it's going to be that top value. But there's also a built-in feature in Excel and in Google Sheets. If you just type out MIN for minimum value in a numeric data set. So I click on minimum, I click on the column that it comes from, so it came from column A. And oops, something I didn't like. Oh, I accidentally hit a little slash in there. So all I did there was equals minimum, open parentheses, clicked column A. So the minimum number in that column is that 29. And then for maximum, I just do the same thing except for MAX. Maximum value in this column is 76. Okay. Now this comes from the description. If you go up, I tell you to use 7 classes. So you will use 7 classes right there. So that's where that's coming from. So I'm going to type that I'm using 7 classes. And now my class width. So to get the class width, what we're going to do is divide the difference between max and min, or what we call the range. So the range is the max minus the minimum. And then we're going to divide by the number of classes. But we're always going to round that up. Even if it ends up being a whole number, we go up 1 unit. So the class width is equal to I'm going to write round up. Alright, and then in the parentheses, the maximum minus the minimum, close the parentheses, divided by the number of classes we want. Okay, and then after we do round up, and I've got what I want it to round, I'll press comma, and then it wants to know how many decimal places do you want to round to, Here, because it's the class width and all my class values are whole numbers, I'm just going to tell it to round to the nearest whole by using 0. Right? 0 rounds to no decimal places, which means a whole number. But if you wanted to round to the nearest tenth, you'd put a 1, hundredth, you'd put a 2, and so on. Okay, and I hit enter, and it says the class width is 7. Alright, so again, all that's doing is, let me just show you, 76 minus 29, and then divided by the number of classes we want was 7, and it's giving me 6.71, but we're rounding that thing up, so we're rounding it up to 7. So that's what's happening in that cell right there. Okay, before we move on to the next bit, we actually don't start here, even though that's the next thing we see. We're actually going to start here, the lower class limit. So the way I do these, again, this is not the way to do a frequency distribution. This is just a way. So the way I do it is I start the lower class limit with the minimum value. So I just hit equals and click on the minimum. And then to go from one lower class limit to the next, we just add the class width. So I'm going to click equals what's above it, the previous class lower class limit, plus the class width. Okay, and now I'm going to drag this cell down all the way until I have 7 classes. So if you have a keyboard shortcut, you can press F4 right now. All right, it doesn't work on mine, but if you had a keyboard shortcut, you could press F4 and it would lock that class width cell in to where when we drag down in just a second, the class width won't drag down. But if you don't have it, you'll need to put $signs around the letter C, or around the letter that's in the cell that you clicked on. And what that does is it locks it in to when I drag in just a second, that cell doesn't drag. Only the previous cell does. So let me show you what I mean by that. After I've done the calculation, I can click back into the cell, and now my cursor, my white arrow, will become a black plus sign when I click on that blue square in the bottom right corner. And when I drag down, if I click on that new cell, what did it do? It added C4, which is the class width, to C8, the thing that was above it. And if I drag that down, it updates the formula again, and it makes C9 get added to C4. But because I've locked in C4 when I drag down, it doesn't move down. Only the first one is moving down. So if you're going to repeatedly add the same thing, which we do for classes, this would be a way to do it. Now, you wouldn't have to do it one by one like that. You could just do the first one. Right? This one's not based on that same formula, but this one is. So once I have that formula, C7 plus C4, C4 locked in, now I can drop down until I have my 7 classes. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 classes. Alright, the upper class limit, the first upper class limit, is 1 less than this next lower class limit. So what I mean by that, to get this upper class limit, I take this value, the second lower class limit, and subtract 1. Alright, and now this class only contains values between 29 and 35, and then this value, this class is going to pick up at 36. Okay, but just like this column, I kept adding the class width to go down every time I went down. I always added that C4. I'm going to do the same thing here. It's always going to be equal to the thing above it plus C4. I'm just going to lock it in like I did before. F4 for the shortcut if you have it. If you don't, you just have to type the $signs around the letter. Alright, click back into the cell, drag down. Alright, and notice now our last class, 71 to 77, does contain the maximum. Okay, upper class boundaries, let's do that next, and then we'll come back and do the lower class boundary at the end. The upper class boundary is going to be the average of this upper class limit and the next lower class limit. So the current upper class limit and the next lower class limit is the average of those two is, and I'm going to just write average of this thing, comma, and this thing. The average of those two things is the boundary, and it's always going to be, when it's whole numbers like this, it's always going to be half a unit bigger than this one. And I'm going to show you that if I did the same thing here, equals average of this number and this number, I would get 42.5 like I got there. But just like the other two columns, I can just click equals the previous value plus the class width. All right, and then lock it in. All right, drag down. There are my upper class boundaries. My lower class boundary, if the pattern were to continue, I'm subtracting 7 every time I go up, just like I added 7 every time I went down. The lowest lower class boundary would be 7 less than this, which ends up making it half a unit less than this. So it ends up being 28.5, or you can also make it equal to that minus the class width. All right, so there is our table. Now, why would I do that? Why would I not just type these numbers in? Well, if let's say that somebody comes along and wins next year, and they are 79 years old. All right. Now the class width changed, the max changed, the cells changed, everything changed. Okay, everything changed to make sure that we can contain our biggest number in our upper class. And I didn't have to do anything. It just did it on its own. So that's why we would, I deleted it just now, that's why we would want it to be interactive like that and based on previous cells, because it makes it interactive. Okay, now we're going to get these frequency and relative frequencies. There's a couple ways you can do it. You can just start counting how many things fall in this category between 29 and 35. So I could type in equals count, and I'm just highlighting the numbers that are 29 to 35. So I'm starting with that 29, and I go down until I get this last 35. So there's 13 there. And now I'm picking up, now count 36 to 42, the lower class limit to the upper class limit. So 36 to 42, and this will work fine. There's nothing wrong with this method. It's just you have to scroll out of the screen for really big data sets. Okay, so another way to do this, and just notice those numbers, 13 and 34. Another way to do this is to have Excel make a histogram for you. Or not Excel, sorry, this is Google Sheets. Make Google Sheets make a histogram for you. So you're going to highlight your data again. And actually, I'm going to highlight it from the bottom up. So I'm going to click that bottom cell and hit Shift Control up to the top. And I'll let go of Shift and Control and up. And I'm just going to hold down now Control and click on that title there. I don't need to select that. And it wouldn't matter if you're going to or not. Actually, if I leave it there, it'll actually title the chart I make. But now I'm going to insert a chart. And the chart I want is histogram. It's given me this line chart, which is fine in its own right, but I want a histogram. Okay, so I click on histogram. If it doesn't suggest a histogram, just scroll down over here with the scroll bar until you see the histogram. It's down here on the other category. Alright, so I've got a histogram. I'm going to double click and tell it to customize the histogram. Now, a couple things that I want. Number one, I need it to have the properties that we have here. So I need the class width to be 7, and I need it to start at 28.5. And the way that I do that is I click on, after I've clicked customize, I click histogram, the little arrow beside it, and then bucket size is Google Sheets way to say class width. So I'm going to change it from auto to 7. Okay, and notice the histogram changed there. I'll close that off, and then I'm going to come down to horizontal axis, and I'm going to find where it says minimum value, and change that to our lower class boundary, which is 28.5. Okay, and now that I have that, my histogram matches these class boundaries, 28.5, and then 35.5, 42.5, 49.5, as you can see it on there, 46.5, and it's got this 80 over here. Don't worry about that. Just notice the last one is the 77.5. So our data fits in there. Now, why would I want that? Why would that help me? When I hover over my histogram to these bars, it tells me the heights of the bars, and the heights of the bars are the frequencies. So 13, 34, like we saw before, and there's all the rest of them. All right, there's none in that sixth class, and then one in that last one. So I have 1, I have a 0, a 9, an 11, a 25, a 34, and the last one was 13. All right, so I can get it from that. I can get it from the histogram display. But you can also do that count feature if you want to. If it was a small data set, that'd be perfectly fine to do that. All right, relative frequency. Relative frequency is defined as the frequency divided by the total. To get the total, you can just highlight that frequency column, go up here to this Greek letter, that's the Greek letter sigma, and choose sum, and then just hit enter. So there's 93 things added together in that frequency column. And now I'm going to choose that first cell under relative frequency. It is defined as the frequency divided by the total. Once again, I'm going to drag down to complete this column. So I want to lock in the total because there's nothing below that, 93, so I don't want it to drag down there. But I do want the first number to drag down. All right, and there is my relative frequency distribution. And if you look at our instructions, so correct class is given the minimum max value and number of classes you choose. We did that. Accuracy of the distribution given our classes. We did that. The relative frequency given our frequency. We did that. And our histogram given our frequency distribution. Use boundaries for the histogram, and we did that. So that's everything we need for this first Excel lab. Okay, now when you present this, now for this is fine, just leave it as is and submit it. But when we go to the final project, first of all, your data, the raw data, the A column will be on its own slide. So we won't have it on the same slide as our histogram, or we won't need it. We can have it. We can have it to make the histogram, but we don't need it to be present there. But the only things that we'll have listed are our lower class limits, upper class limits, and then the frequency column. All this other stuff is just to learn what they are and how to use them. But this will be the big thing that you'll definitely need to be able to do for your project. All right, once you're ready to submit it, you're going to go up here to share. You're going to copy this link. Don't do anyone with the link is fine for me to edit it, or you can restrict it, and then I can open it and grade it. If you keep it restricted, that's fine. And if I have to get access, I'll send you an email asking for access. But once you have that, and you've clicked on copy link, click on our class, and I'm going to click on switch role to student so you guys can see what it's going to look like when you go to turn it in. Come down here to the bottom and go to, instead of add submission, just click on the comments bar. I've already put one in here. And you just click on add comment and paste in your comment. Okay, or paste in the link to your sheet. And then when I go to grade it, there'll be a comment there, and I'll just open it up and click on it, and it'll open up and have all that stuff there. Alright, so I wanted you guys to just kind of have a walkthrough just to practice it if you need extra practice. But when I grade these, I'm going to click on the cells to make sure that they have formulas in the cells. Alright, that they're not just numbers, that they are interactive, they're dependent on something else.